think the biggest contribution a person can make on this planet is to seek truth, be truth, speak truth with the intent to educate and inspire others to do the same at some point in the future. But today, that's what I think is the biggest contribution a person can make. And not just any truth, like whether or not the earth is round or flat, but truth that's significant. Truth that actually speaks to the depth of what it means to be a human being. Truth that speaks to the spirit of man in a way that awakens it to not only acknowledge the full extent of its power, but to live life out through an understanding and acknowledgement and usage of that power in complete capacity. That kind of truth. The collective consciousness of the world speaks to the current condition of the world. So absolutely, we all live here together. We all influence this place together. We all influence this realm within this place together. There really is no such thing as an independent activity. Everything is connected. We're all connected to each other. And if we believe that, then that doesn't only exist in a physical form. That exists in the intangible form as well, which of course would be consciousness. And this comes to us. Spirituality is for sale today. The concept of manifestation is for sale. All natural law doesn't really seem to be held sacred, where we're on a quest to truly understand it. But it's become, we have to some extent become a society where we can only justify what we can commercialize. If we can't attach a price to it, then it's not worthy of our time, including self-improvement. Much like training your body physically, hiring a personal trainer, hiring a nutritionist, hiring a dietitian, hiring a physical therapist, much like your mind, hiring a therapist, a psychologist, a psychiatrist. That's what spirituality is seemingly becoming as well. Who has done it? Who has some experience in that? And can I hire them to teach it to me? And if I care to improve myself, how can I justify this improvement? It's no longer really about just being a better human being. Really having a deeper understanding of life and seeking truth for yourself, etc. It's more about how can I sell this? And to some extent, we're all seeking a better life. We're all developing ourselves in some shape, form, or fashion. Because we're spiritual beings, whether we acknowledge it or not. Because we're all connected to source energy, whether we acknowledge it or not. And whether we acknowledge it or not. We're all practicing some sort of spirituality. And when we acknowledge it, it seems like we're much more interested in selling it than being it, understanding it, growing within. And if we're going to share it, then share it in a way that's real, not in a way that's commercial. And we seem to be much more interested in sharing it in a way that's commercial. Because it requires time, because it requires attention, because it requires focus, because it requires intention, because it requires accountability. It takes up a lot of your energy. And again, because it takes up a lot of our energy, the only way that we can validate that in modern society is to be compensated for it. And so it seems as if those who are seeking a spiritual awakening or quote unquote enlightenment have placed it up for sale as opposed to living their lives out through that, thus being an example of that, and inspiring the world in that way. Because when you're 100% of who you are, you give other people in the world permission to be 100% of who they are. But if they don't see it, in a lot of instances, they don't believe it to be real. So in that way, you can inspire someone truly. You can inspire someone from the essence of what it means to inspire. not market your current understanding as enlightenment, and thus increase your chances of actually selling it for profit. That's a different thing. That's what it seems to be today. That seems to be the current state of enlightenment in modern society. Pretty much all of them work the same way. Is it the underlying theory that applies to more than just one thing? That's why it's a cliche. Otherwise, it would be a cliche. It'd just be someone teaching you about cell phones. And the only time this really applies is when they're talking about cell phones. Or someone speaking to you about a microphone. And the only time it applies is when they're speaking to you about a microphone. But what if you want to say something that applies to both of these at the same time? It becomes a cliche. That's the point of a cliche. So we don't have to visit each and every context in order for you to understand it. As you're living your life and you go through different situations in your life, you can apply this cliche to multiple aspects in your life. That means you're speaking from a place of understanding that defies this space at this time. That's consciousness. Does that make sense? Yes. But that's more like a hard fact. So chances are that won't be something that's considered a cliche to most people. Input equals output. So there's not a lot of nuance in there. A cliche is a new broom can sweep the floor, but an old broom knows where the dirt is. That's a cliche. Does it literally mean that? No. You had a broom for 10 years and you just bought this new broom. The person is who it's referring to, not the broom. But when you're a child, you actually think it's about the broom. So you might go searching for an old broom, thinking it's going to help you clean the house faster, when that's not really what it's about. In that context, you are the broom in your life. It's your responsibility to clean up your life. As you age, you have enough experiences to know where the dirt is in your life, where your traumas are, what you need to do, who you need to speak to, who you need not to speak to, what situations you need to not put yourself in, etc., etc. And not only do you know it for yourself, you can now see it for others. You can see it in others. So it's not about the broom. Part of what makes it a cliche. Input equals output. That's like a hard fact. It's not. It could be considered a cliche in some regard, but for the most part, it lacks the nuance that would allow it to speak to multiple instances across contexts in life. So it's more like a hard fact. Nothing other than the extent of it. Oftentimes when we say we're aware on the surface level. Example, you walk into a room and someone else is in the room, you're aware that they're in the room. Meaning you literally understand that they are physically present in the room. Beyond that, it doesn't really mean anything, usually, and how we actually utilize the word aware today. Consciousness is not just being aware that this person is in a room, it's being aware of what that means in full context, because they choose to be. Some people are more aware than others because they choose to be. For some people, not being aware is painful, whereas to other people, being aware is painful. Usually, not being aware and choosing to remain that way comes from not being aware. Not understanding that the pain that you feel in being aware is short-lived, and the benefit of being aware is indefinite. Learning something may be painful. It's not fun necessarily. Right? If you like to learn over all other things, and that is considered fun to you, and so you prioritize it, oftentimes you're considered a nerd or a geek. Because the average person doesn't care to do that. The average person cares to do what they already know how to do it, what's familiar to them. They don't prefer learning. So the choice that they're making is to not be aware, right? Or to limit their awareness, essentially. Only do the things that they are already aware of to the extent that they're aware of it. Not to learn more about it, not to learn more about what's connected to it, anything like that. Unless they're forced to. They don't actively seek that awareness. Whereas a nerd or a geek does. The nerd or the geek is choosing not to be ignorant. Whereas the person who is not choosing to be aware by default is choosing to be ignorant. Which is why oftentimes the cool kids end up working for the nerds. Because oftentimes your value in the long run comes from what you know, what you're aware of, what you continue to build on mentally, emotionally, spiritually. It's that quest for more understanding, that quest for more knowledge, that quest to use your brain in different ways, which is intellect. That brings about advancement in the world, that promotes more life, and life promotes what promotes more life. So again, what may have seemed painful at the beginning, which was learning, is short-lived. And the benefits of it are indefinite. Those years that you were in school, they're short-lived. They seem like a long time when you're there, but it's not really that long. The life after is way longer. You're older, much longer than you're younger. You're considered young for the first 20, 30 years of your life. Let's say you live to 80, 90, 100 years old. There's so many more years when you're considered an adult than the years that you're considered a child. So those years of learning as a child seem like forever when you're a child, but they're really not that long. The years after are very long, or much longer than the ones that you experience as a child. And so the benefit of what you do as a child, especially if you choose to be aware, serve you much longer, or you experience the benefit much longer than you experience the pain of learning as a child. So those years in school were short. The years after are much longer. When you were in school as the cool kid that decided not to be aware because being rebellious was cool, you're going to be the cool kid. But only in high school, which is why a lot of people peak in high school. Keep talking about the things they did in high school, even though they're 45 now. Meanwhile, the nerd who was studying in high school is the guy that you're working for now. And you're going to be working for that guy for the next 40 years of your life. You picked on him. He was not cool in high school, but that only lasted 4 years. Your professional years going to last 40. He's going to be your boss the whole way through. So the years of, or the pain of learning is short. The benefits are indefinite. And the only difference between the person who's aware and the person who isn't is the choice that they make. Are you choosing to be aware, or are you choosing by default not to be? I don't think people are unaware of the consequences of not being aware. People are not necessarily interested or attracted to the future. It's not real to most people. That's why most people don't invest, because the future is not a real thing to them. The past is real, the present is real. The future is not real. If it hasn't happened, there's some distant time that they can't really wrap their minds around. It's not really a real thing. It's real when it's here, when it's happening. The amount of spatial reasoning that's required in order to really consider the future as a reality is something that many of us seem to struggle with. And so it's not that people are not aware of the consequences of choosing to not be aware. They don't consider the future a real thing subconsciously. And so perhaps they don't take the consequences seriously because the consequences exist somewhere in the future and the future is not real. No, procrastination happens when you think the future is real, at least the immediate future. And so you think you have time to do whatever it is that you understand you should be doing right now. Procrastination is a bit of the opposite, but it's also a shorter time window, usually. It's not necessarily someone is procrastinating today on something that they think they have 10 years to do. It's not usually considered, that kind of time span is not usually what's considered when we say someone's procrastinating. It's more along the lines of a time span that falls within the immediate or the foreseeable future. So 6 months, a year, that kind of thing, a week. You got to get this paper done. It's due in 2 weeks. I'll start it next week. That's procrastination. Not you're in 3rd grade and you want to get a PhD one day, and you're already thinking about the PhD in 3rd grade, and you think that I need to hurry up and get this homework assignment up so I can get the PhD eventually. That's not usually what we're talking about when we say someone is procrastinating. So it's a different time span.